Welcome to the Kent Lapp Podcast.
Hello, Wayne.
Good afternoon.
Welcome back.
Glad to be here.
I am sort of curious how long it has been since you were in this exact room. We were sitting right here, and we had a Mevo camera, which we're about to upgrade from, but it was a different Mevo. It was just you and I remember.
Yeah, things have changed since then.
Yeah, a little bit.
You kind of spruced the place up. It looks nice.
Yeah, thank you. We have done a lot to this little room here. I think it was 2018, maybe.
I think it's been almost 2 years. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, welcome back.
Thank
you. Good
you.
to have you back. Now, in the meantime, quite a lot has happened in the world, and one of the things that's happened is you've gotten COVID.
I have. I don't. Do you ever get rid of it? Is the question I'm trying to figure out. But
okay,
I was the recipient of that fine virus.
How was that?
Well, it affects everybody differently. My friend Michael Easley. So I had the privilege of giving it to him, which was awesome.
Michael Easley got the virus?
He did, yeah.
How did he handle it? Because
here's the good news. I got it bad, and he got the easy route.
Really?
So, for him, it was more some congestion and, a little bit in his lungs, coughing, that kind of thing. But it wasn't too bad for him. I was fortunate to get what I describe as Groundhog Day 12 days in a row.
Okay.
So I had severe chills. I'd start the day when I'd get out of bed with severe chills where I couldn't stop my body from shaking. And within 45 minutes or an hour, I'd have a fever. And then it would just repeat itself 24 hours a day through the night for 12 days.
The fever would go away during the night?
No, it would go away for an hour. Then I'd get the chills. Then it would come back on for 2 hours.
Interesting.
And it just did it over and over again. I had no trouble breathing. I lost maybe some taste a little bit.
Okay.
But for the most part, for me, I'm a wuss when it comes to fevers. Break my arm, give me pain, and I'm fine.
Yeah.
But I'm like a little kid when it comes to a fever.
Oh, dude, I'm the worst, man. I think I'm going to die every time I get a little tiny fever.
Well, I'm day 6 of this thing, and I'm thinking, oh, maybe this is the end. I don't know. And then I got good news. My oldest son, I was talking to him, and he said, hey, I've got these really close friends, and the wife contracted it.
Okay.
And she had a fever for 14 days. And I said to myself, well, great. I'm going to start counting days then because maybe it'll be over in 14. So that kind of plussed me up a little bit that I didn't think it was the end. And on the 12th day, it just went away.
What was your fever?
It would go like to 101, not high.
Okay, very, very similar to Jeremy Rose's. There was a guy on just recently, had it as well. He had it pretty long too. He had it for 10 days.
Did he?
And it was bad. He got it he got it bad. He never thought he was going to die. And you didn't think you were going to die seriously, or do I have that wrong? Did you have some serious thoughts about that?
Not really.
Okay. Did you go to the hospital?
No.
Why not? Because everyone was going to the hospital at one point. Okay. Is this one of the things we've learned about the virus? You don't really need to go to the hospital unless you start to really get...
Well, keep in mind, I really had no congestion. The whole reason with the hospital is if your oxygen levels drop.
Okay.
And if you can't breathe well.
Yeah.
Apart from that, you're just asking for trouble.
Yeah. How were you monitoring your blood oxygen levels?
I have one of those little devices that you stick on your finger.
Okay. That's what he was using too. Did you go get it after you got COVID, or did you happen to have one at the house?
You'll love this. So my youngest son, his father-in-law contracted it.
Okay. Not Justin, right? He's not your youngest.
Justin's my youngest.
Justin is your youngest.
Justin's one you know. Yeah. So Justin's father-in-law, Ron, got it.
Okay.
And his her husband, his mother-in-law, is the sweetest person ever. And they live in Chicago. So she instructed her daughter, Maddie, Justin's wife, to immediately go out and buy us one and bring it to the house.
Okay. So you had one delivered.
Yes.
Because they knew what you needed.
I didn't even go get it. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. I mean, I'm tempted to just get one of those things on Amazon and have it around the house.
They're like $50. It's
Are they?
Pretty simple,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Because simple. You could also, I wonder if it would make sense to check your blood oxygen levels even outside of COVID, just with like monitoring your body. I mean, I've never heard of people doing that for people that really get into fitness, like monitoring their blood oxygen levels, but it can't hurt, right? I mean,
I haven't done it ever. I was a runner for the longest time, and, I do a little bit more aerobics inside and lift still, and I've never even thought about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not aware that anyone does it. It could be that it's one of those things that it doesn't really drop unless you get sick with something like COVID, and then you're going to want to monitor it. So you were monitoring your fever, you were monitoring your blood oxygen levels, and if your blood oxygen levels would have dipped below a certain point, you would have went to the hospital.
Well, I think there's always a concern if you get under 90, then you got a problem. It's based on oxygen consumption, so. Yeah, you don't really have a choice. Here's the thing that you're signing up for if you go to the hospital. You're going to be isolated, not just in an ICU, but in a COVID ICU, which immediately prevents anybody from being with you.
Yeah.
So you're by yourself.
Yep.
You are effectively turning over the control of your body to a bunch of strangers that may not know any more about this disease than you do. And that's a problem from my vantage point. So I'd view going to the hospital as the very last thing. Now, I have a strong view on the virus. I think you know me well enough to know that I'm very much a quantitative guy. So facts, data, analysis means a lot to me. And I have been, I don't even know what the right word is. I'll use the word disappointed with science in the medical field for how emotional and qualitative they've become with this virus, and have effectively abandoned what I would describe as the normal practice of quantifying things and really finishing, the science process. That's different than the epidemiologists that are sitting in a lab and they're just running tests. And then when you start turning over the world to epidemiologists, you're going to have a problem because they're living in a lab. They're not looking at these other indicators. I gave you one example that happened several months ago. And I think we have this food company, so I'm pretty involved with the FDA and the USDA and the CDC. We've got 250 people working in a food plant that we never shut down. And I want to say we've had 3 instances of the virus, and they were all young people, and it was very minor. We've had a bunch of people go get tested. I mean, the media and the medical field have frightened America to the point that anything you feel odd, it must be COVID, I need to go get a test. That's a sad state for our country, for us to end up here at this point. So I don't really care what side of the political spheres you are on to create that kind of a cultural incentive and environment in our country. It's a problem because you've got at least some set of the total population that doesn't have access to good information. And they're believing whatever the media is saying, whatever sound bites they get. We've got down in our plant, a segment of our workforce are hourly production folks. And it's been interesting to watch their reaction. We're south of Williamson County, so they watch Williamson County and the reaction, that's happening up in Williamson County, and they're diametrically opposed to the controls that are being put on folks.
And that's Williamson County. Davidson's way worse than Williamson County.
Well, think about that for a second.
Yeah.
So, we're talking down in Marshall County. So they're opposed to that, but their voices often get lumped into a media message that says they're uninformed, they're naive, they take risks that are unnecessary. Well, that's not the experience I have
Ignorant
with
country
these folks.
folk. Like, that's the stereotype, right?
Yeah.
Ignorant country people.
You want to talk about stereotypes, there's one for you. These folks are as informed as, professionals are. They just have a different view of life. One, they know they have to go to work to put food on the table to care for their family. So I would say they're better informed because they're having to deal with the balancing act of, if I don't go to work, next step is poverty. If I go to work, my kids get to go to school, I've got food, I can put gas in the car. They have a much clearer understanding of what America is than folks that have the privilege to say, well, I can go work from my house. Yeah. I can sit at home all day.
Yep.
Well, the bad news that I have for every one of those folks is without that other section of the economy, there's nothing for you to do.
Yeah, that's a great point.
So there's a lot I think there's a lot for us to learn. Anyway, I rambled off on a sidebar. What I was going to say to you was, this is what, October, end of October. So this would probably have been back in June. There was a study done out of Boston General where they were evaluating the impact of masks, which is the hot topic for everybody.
Yep.
And they did a 60-day study of every single person that had come into Boston, Mass. I mean, a full science study of it. There were 2 reports published from that study, not by the folks that did the science, but one by the American Medical Association and the other by, what's the other big medical group? It'll come to me as we're talking.
Try to Google it, Andrew, while he's thinking.
So you got these 2 reports that come out. The American Medical Association it might have been Harvard Medical Review. I think it was, or something related to Harvard. So the American Medical Association draws the conclusion and writes a full-blown report that gets published on the USDA and CDC websites. And it basically says what we're hearing, the sky's falling, wear a mask or you'll die. Now I'm being a little facetious here, but it was very full of warnings. The other report that's written says exactly the opposite. It says that if you're not within 10 feet of a person that is visibly showing the symptoms of COVID or has tested positive for COVID, and you're not in their presence for anything less than 30 or 45 minutes, there's a 99.9% chance it just won't transfer, whether you have a mask on or not. Now, my point here isn't to pick sides or to say one's right and the other is wrong. It is to say 2 well-known medical journals that disagree with each other, not a little bit, 180%.
Yep.
Now, as a guy that's more of a quantitative guy, that just indicates to me we don't have enough data.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have enough information. And what's happening is because medicine has turned it over to media, we're sending all of this information out into the populace and just confusing folks.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's just disturbing for me. This is not about the administration handling it well. This is about our medical field and our doctors handling it well. And for me, it's disturbing.
So you touched on a couple things there that we need to dig into. Well, first of all, the idea that when you go into the hospital with COVID, you lose sort of all rights to your body. That was the single scariest thing to me a few months ago. I'm less concerned about it now because now I've talked to you, I've talked to Jeremy Rose, I've talked to other people that have gotten COVID, never went to the hospital. A few people. I know I had one friend who's like, no offense, but she's probably like one of the least healthy people that I know. And she got COVID, and it was 3 days, barely a fever. She had a cough, but she always has a cough. That's her words, not mine. And she lost her sense of smell. And it was like the single friend that I would be the most concerned about that would get COVID. It was no big deal. And then you have a very healthy person like Jeremy Rose, who's a local pastor. It was 10 days of fever, and he's like me and you that thinks they're going to die every time you get a fever, no matter what it is. And then you had a real bad fever. I'm shocked to hear Michael Easley got it and didn't get very sick, which I'm very pleased to hear.
Think about his health circumstances.
He has very difficult things going on. Like he has chronic pain and whatever. I mean, he's got a lot going on. So I'm really pleased to hear that. So I think I'm a little bit less concerned now if I would get it. And even if you get to the point where you have to go into the hospital. But what was really concerning me was when they didn't know much, people were going into the hospital and they were, basically jamming ventilators down people's throats. And that was causing people to die. And I think they've really eased up on that now. And there's less people going to the hospital.
It's my understanding that there's a lot of other treatments before you get to that.
Thankfully, yes. Yes.
It happens. I've got a friend that contracted COVID that has a lot of comorbidities. And I don't want to get into all of them, but he'd be the perfect candidate to contract it and pass away. And he did end up on a ventilator for a while.
Wow.
And he's off.
Okay.
And he's improving, but he's still in the hospital, and he's probably been in the hospital for a month.
Wow. Yeah. And I mean, look, we have a friend from church whose dad died from this. And I mean, I think there's a lot of people that die with COVID too. Maybe not from COVID, but they die with COVID and then it gets tagged as a COVID death. But this idea of the medicine turning over to the media, this is very concerning, because if this stuff happens again, and it will, we're setting a precedent for the future, whether it has to do with the pandemic or it has to do with other things. The media has so much control. And that's actually I think that's put the best that I've heard it so far. I've not heard it in those succinct terms with medicine turning over to media. So,
well, let me interrupt you for just a second, and I'll just name a name. I find it fascinating when I think about this Dr. Fauci. Who ever heard of an epidemiologist on the front page of magazines?
Yeah.
Wanting to be interviewed, not by, what I would call technical interviews, but let's put them on the talk shows at night. I mean, I've never seen that before.
That's a very good point.
I'm not taking a jab at Fauci. I'm just saying this is a cultural thing going on right now that is very new.
Yeah. You know what's crazy about Fauci and those guys? They're allowed to own patents on drugs. Did you know that?
Yes.
That does not seem right. They're setting the law and they're making the regulations and they have all of this control. And correct me if I'm wrong, but they're working for the U.S. government. Most of the time, if you work for a corporation and you have intellectual property that you develop while you're working there, the corporation owns that intellectual property, right?
Not always.
Not always, but
always.
Often. That's very common.
In the area of research, it's not uncommon for the scientists to have some ownership in what it is that they're developing. Now, they may not be able to go use it elsewhere, but they, on paper, own that IP.
It just seems like a very big opportunity for conflict of interest. That's what it seems like. Is it a conflict of interest? Are they doing things that are self-serving? I don't know. I know some people would say so when it comes to vaccines and so forth. But at the very least, it seems like an opportunity for a conflict of interest.
Yeah, and as it relates to Fauci, I've heard both, that he does own patents. I've heard that he doesn't own patents. I don't really have the facts. I'll just make this observation. When it comes to government and the bureaucracy associated with all the protections of folks that work in government, it wouldn't surprise me that conflict of interest exists.
I agree. So what's interesting about COVID, though, is this is one of the few things that we're doing a day by day, hour by hour, minute by minute death ticker on. We're not doing that.
Think about that.
We're not. Yeah. Think about that.
Think about that. I mean, we know more about that than we know about any sporting event, the World Series or the NBA playoffs. I mean,
those things were a haze. I don't know. It came and went.
It's
I didn't
crazy.
even pay attention.
It's crazy.
Yeah. But what we're not taking deaths on is tobacco death. That's 500,000 a year. People in America alone die from tobacco. It takes an average of 10 years off people's life, probably a lot more in a lot of cases. Tuberculosis. You know how many people die from tuberculosis annually?
I do not.
Well, okay, let me tell you. 1 every 22 seconds. 1.4 million people a year die from tuberculosis globally. Now, I think this is, interestingly enough, or thankfully, America has seemed to really have a good handle on that. I don't know how that is. That's probably from vaccines, I'm thinking. In 2017, only like 545 people died in America from tuberculosis. But globally, it's a huge issue, 1.4 million. And I think the global death tally with the virus now is like 1.18 million, something like that.
I think the last data that I looked at, I think it was CDC, or it might have been NIH. I want to say that the COVID virus on a scale of deaths was maybe 10th or 11th on the list. So there's 9 or 10 other, diseases that on an annual basis more folks die from. Now, I did hear an interesting stat that I can't confirm. A couple of days ago, I got it from a science guy, but I did. At the time, I wasn't thinking about it. I didn't ask him to validate it. But the comment that he made to me was what they're seeing this year they're starting to contrast influenza and COVID-19 now, and they're starting to develop some data, to use it as a way to try and not just see the crossover opportunities, but understand effects and impacts. And he told me that there are very few deaths of influenza, and that in fact, what they're believing is folks that die from influenza are the same people that have the same problems that are dying from COVID. So they might have upper respiratory issues. They might have overweight issues, high blood pressure issues, heart disease, all of these kinds of things that when your systems get tested, where you don't have enough oxygen or your temperature of your body is higher, it triggers, these existing conditions to kind of flash to, DEFCON 5 and you could pass away. And what this fellow was telling me is it's almost to no deaths on influenza because they're believing that before the season's coming in, all the people that had all of those comorbidities are dying with COVID, and there's not going to be deaths from an influenza point of view. So if you back that up, and they're starting to create data, if you back that up and start looking at it, I'm not an expert. I'm not in the medical field. I'm just relating to you from a statistical point of view, just data. I would say one of the things I'd want to do is, okay, so let's go back and look. We know that, a year ago, the deaths from influenza were somewhere in the 70,000 number. We're saying that I think today it's 227,000. And we know that's a suspect number anyway, because they can't really validate a lot of this.
Yep.
And it is a big difference of with versus caused by.
Right.
And every state has different rules on how they go about that. But it would seem to me that the deaths that we're putting on that flashing screen are overstated because they haven't been able to really look at it from an influenza versus a COVID point of view.
So that's interesting. So we're having a hard time at scale telling the difference whether someone is dying with COVID or with the flu, you're saying?
Well, I think what's happening is you're dealing with, it is a coronavirus. Influenza is a coronavirus.
Exactly.
There's a strain that we're calling COVID-19.
Yes, SARS-CoV-2.
Right.
Yep.
What they're saying now is that strain is morphing into other strains. So it's not the same as it was in March, is what the medical field is saying. I'm just making the observation, well, influenza is one of those strains from a previous, coronavirus. So now you've got to take a look at the population of all these different strains. It's going to get grayer. It's not going to get clearer in the medical field, is my view.
One of the things that was interesting when I was really trying to make some sense of this a few months ago, or really in the spring in particular, was the average age of people dying with COVID-19. It was very close to the average age of people dying, period.
It's the same.
And that's...
The average age, the data that I've seen, it's a month or 6 weeks old. The average age of a person that dies from COVID is 78. The average age of a male in the United States that dies is 78.
And that's shocking. To do what we're doing in this country, to do what we're doing globally, which I don't know the average death rates or death age globally, COVID versus non-COVID, so bringing it back to America. But when you look at the fear and the things that we have done in this country, it's hard to justify that when you look at the average death age of COVID versus non-COVID.
Well, you got to think. I think you have to think about it even bigger than that. I mean, when you think about life in general, your health is a component of it. Your livelihood and your ability to generate income to provide for yourself is a component of it. The stressors in your life are a component of it, whether it's family or whatever that happens to be, emotional traumas that you have. Well, you've got to build a plan based on all of those things. You can't just build a plan on one. And I think that's one of the points. That's one of the things that I hear the president speak too often that doesn't get picked up. No one seems to kind of follow up on that from a media point of view. Here's a stat for you. In the United States, since COVID, if you do a snapshot today, you would find that the top 10 states with the highest unemployment, the biggest problems with safety for individuals from a point of society, I mean, I can go down through the list, are all the states that have tried to control everything.
Yes.
And those, I don't want to make this political, they tend to fall into more of the progressive mindset where let's be afraid of everything. Let's view things from a perspective of government as my savior, not my faith as my savior, government as my savior, and let's just mandate stuff.
Yes.
Now, it's odd, but when you move into more conservative states, there's a much more balanced approach to it, and there is a view that every death is a sad thing, and yet we can't prevent death at a macro level.
Yep.
What we can do is do our best to minimize it, but minimizing death isn't just minimizing how many people get COVID, it's realizing that 99.9% of folks that get COVID recover. And is to say, what can we do for the 0.1? How do we solve this problem for the 0.1 while we're trying to keep the numbers down? But let's not forget, we got to build an economy. Or we're going to be there is going to be a generation, a piece of a generation that is going to live in poverty for the rest of their life because of the way this thing has been handled in our country. I mean, I look at it from a small business point of view. You were sharing your own experience. Let me, I thought we were brilliant in our food company. Now I've got the food company and I'm working on this health company, but in the food company, I thought we were brilliant. About a third of our business was grocery. About a third of our business was national restaurant chains, and about a third of our business was big broadline distributors. I thought it's brilliant. It's all the major things you do from a corporate strategy point of view. Well, shut the country down.
Yeah.
All of our restaurant business came to a halt. Well, big broadline food distributors service all of these independent little restaurants, so that got impacted. Our business dropped from day 1 to day 2, 50%. I mean, that's crazy. And I'm in a capital intensive business because it's a food manufacturing business. That was a problem.
That's a big problem.
That was a problem. Well, now let's just take that broadline distribution segment that's serving all of these small restaurants. It is a tragedy what these state governments that aren't reasonable have done to these individuals that own these small businesses. And I don't care if it's a restaurant or if it's, a dry cleaning store, pick it. But the restaurant industry as a whole, these folks will never come back. They're shut down. Now, when the economy recovers, will a restaurant surface maybe in that space? Yes, but it's going to be somebody else that had the money to go in there with that restaurant, and that poor family that lost everything isn't coming back.
Yep.
That's what we're doing to folks.
Yep.
You can't lead a country by just saying our job is to wear masks, lock ourselves down, and just forget about everything.
Yep.
It's ridiculous.
Yep. It's that one-dimensional focus that you're talking about. We put so much focus on having no one die from COVID at the expense of everything else. And I think this comes back to, so I experienced this kind of personally with the business in the last couple of years too, which is where you, in business, this is one of the great things that I really enjoy about business, because you want to set a goal on sales, that's fantastic, but you have to keep everything else in line. If you chase a sales goal at the expense of everything else or at the expense of too much else, that doesn't work. So you have to, it's just like, I always picture it like this net. And if you want to raise sales, that's great, but you have to understand how the effect that has on the rest of the net, operations, finance, all of these things. So right now, we're just having all this focus on COVID, and it's shutting these businesses down. Now, you mentioned didn't want to go political on it, but I think that's okay too. When you look at just objectively how certain states are handling this, California is maybe one of the more extreme examples. New York is probably another good example. Which when you want to talk about news coverage, I don't want to sidetrack from where we're going here, but we want to talk about news coverage. why is Cuomo not getting more news coverage for forcing elderly people back into nursing homes in New York State, killing 11,000 of them?
He did a press conference today to deliver his message that every person that has died from COVID, Donald Trump is responsible for.
It's
bizarre.
It's absurd.
It's bizarre.
Absurd. I know people just heard this recently on the podcast, but I have family in upstate New York, and they get into kind of what's going on, and sometimes I don't always read the articles because it sounds a little out there. Well, this summer on the family text thread was like, Cuomo sending people back into nursing homes with COVID. And I'm like, I didn't even really pay attention because there's no way. Yeah, there is a way. He made the law, and they had to go back into nursing homes. But the press doesn't cover that. Mm-hmm. And so the press seems to be, to me, it seems to be strongly left-leaning for whatever reason.
Well, I don't think you even have to be qualitative about that. The stats that are coming out now, if you take a look at, if you just take the two parties, and let's just make it specific to the presidential election. So, if you got a Democrat in Biden, you got a Republican in Trump. I want to say that the stats that came out yesterday were, if you look across all the major media networks, 96% of the coverage of Trump is negative. Well, I get it that, he says some stuff that ticks me off.
Yep.
But we're focused on policy and caring for people. It can't be 96%.
That's right.
I mean, when you're looking at an economy that was just on fire before COVID.
It really was. Let's not forget.
I mean, let's not forget it was about deregulation, It was about reducing taxes. It was about bringing manufacturing jobs back to America. I don't care whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. You can't argue that had an impact on the economy.
Exactly.
Now, you can have a different view that, hey, we need to generate some more tax money because we need to be doing some stuff for some people that we haven't been. Okay, if you want to have that argument, but you just can't say, no, it was all bad.
Yeah. Well, I agree with that, but also touching on, do you want to have a little bit more taxes so you can generate money for other people that maybe aren't as taken care of, but also keep in mind, those segments of the population also did better under Trump than they were doing under a more Democratic president as well. So,
the average income of a person has gone up significantly in the 4 years that he's been president for folks, hourly production people, all the way up through middle class.
But what's interesting about the press and Trump, I know this isn't the case, but it's almost like if it wasn't for the thing of having a second term, okay? If that was just a shoo-in where like Trump was just going to be president for 8 years, then I would wonder if there's not some sort of secret agreement between Trump and the news. And the secret agreement basically is we're going to make you look like an idiot and we're going to flourish because of that. And you're still going to be president because he saved basically MSNBC. So there was someone on a Megyn Kelly podcast recently.
There isn't anybody that he hasn't saved.
Well,
from a media
standpoint, I do agree with that. There was a what do you call it? A press, like a dinner for the press. It was like the last one under Obama, and there was people there talking with Megyn Kelly, and basically like, I guess it was nice to see you. This would be the last time. We're at MSNBC. We're done. We're over. We're going out of business. And along came Trump, and guess what? We still have MSNBC. So he's really saved the news, which is interesting because they still position him in such a negative light. Which doesn't really make sense. Like if this guy's but maybe they're being saved because they're positioning him in such a negative light, and that's bringing in viewership, I guess. But why is let's come back to Trump. So first of all, when we look at how the states are handling it, that is a very interesting way to look at it because for whatever reason, and I'm curious about this, I think it's because there's political motivations. I think it's because people like a scapegoat. And also because, keep in mind, this was a new thought to me, but an author, I read this recently, the most basic need of people, of humans, is not for freedom, it's to be taken care of. So that explains why when anything goes on like this, if there's going to be a drift, even in America, the drift is towards socialism, communism, because at least we're taken care of. Like that's the innermost kind of innate need. Now, I think lots of people understand that that's a bad idea just to do whatever you need to do to be taken care of, because then you're at their mercy. And so there's a lot of people that understand that and fight against that need to be taken care of and fight for freedom. But again, the point being that lots of people drift towards just being taken care of. So when you look at how states are handling the virus, which again doesn't get the attention that it should, because everyone wants to talk about how Trump's handling it. But one of the things that he's handling, I think, decently is allowing the governors to handle it, right? I mean, this is the United States of America.
We do have a constitution still.
Yeah, we do.
I think we're trying to tear it up, but it's there, yeah.
I do agree with that. But states' rights is a thing. It's one of the reasons that this country has worked as well as it has. So you can look at how California is handling the pandemic, and you can look at how Texas is handling it. And then you can see what's working and what's not, and why is that. And right now, a lot of people are leaving California and they're moving to Texas. So what's interesting to me about that is that we have all these random case studies across America right now. But it still seems like, even though we can take a step back and look at, all right, if you want to have a more authoritarian control from top down, less freedoms, we tell you what to do, we shut down businesses when we think it's necessary and all of that. When you have that going on in California, and then you look at a more libertarian, free market, open market state like Texas, and you can see what's working and what's not. Even though we have those case studies, the sentiment in lots of circles is still towards that authoritarian, socialistic bent.
Well, I think it's true for California, Illinois, and New York. Throw New Jersey in there with it. The dilemma that the U.S. has, and one of the benefits of having an electoral college, is if you look at the mix of population, by the time you add up those 4 states, they could pretty much control the U.S.
Yep.
So we probably need the electoral college now more than ever, or you don't have a United States anymore.
Right.
Now, but to your point, it's a complex thing. If it was easy to analyze, we'd be hearing about it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it has multiple prongs, and there are parallel paths going on at the same time. Let me just, make one observation, and I want to give you a couple examples. Something I don't hear spoken about. We're all the noise now about how many people are voting, right? So many votes and this and that. Well, I'll make this observation, and it plays into your media comment about Trump. Whether you like him or not, America is more involved in democracy today than it has been in a 100 years.
Has it really?
And that would not be the case.
That's interesting.
Without a Donald Trump in there stirring the pot and creating controversy.
That's an interesting idea.
So, one of the good
Is that a fact, by the way, in 100 years?
Oh, yeah. The number of people voting?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine that once the votes are tallied, this will be the highest number of folks that have ever voted in a presidential election.
I think we're at 27 million today. I saw that in the Wall Street Journal this morning.
It's crazy.
Yep.
It's crazy. Now, a couple of observations I was going to make about just how complex it is. Well, let's we kind of got to rewind for just a minute. When Trump ended up coming in, he wasn't supposed to win, if you remember. And Hillary Clinton was ordained, if you will, to be the president. So it was a fairly big surprise to the progressive liberal side of the aisle. And that's not ever been forgotten. Now, so the question is, why was it such a big deal? They've lost before, just like the Republicans have lost before. I don't have the answer, but I'll make an observation. We're talking about a very successful business person that just came in, who was using these words, drain the swamp. Well, that's basically a frontal attack on politics. And when you're talking about draining the swamp, you're talking about the Republicans and the Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about these folks that have made, lifelong careers out of serving America. No, getting what they want for themselves.
Right.
Now, I don't want to discount, or there are good people in there that are serving, but I would say I've been watching the candidates that are coming forward to run for both the House and the Senate in the last 8 years. It's a different group of people. It's people that are actually talking about, I want America to be better.
It's a better group of people.
They're coming out of the medical field. It's not just attorneys that have political science degrees that, from the day they got out of school, went to Washington and worked for some elected official with the idea that they were going to turn that into a career. These are folks that haven't been in politics before, that are coming in and saying, I want to do something good. Now, that's not to take away from the fact there's this machine in politics where you can leave politics, get a job in a media organization, write a book, whatever that happens to be, and you're going to be fine because, like it or not, we've set it up that way.
Exactly.
But if we can get folks coming in that are coming in for the right reasons, you're at least going to get a period of time out of them before that happens, where I think you'll find Republicans and Democrats working together. I make this observation. I used to belong to the Republican Governors Association, and I got out of it about 8 years ago. And from the inside, you learn things that you wouldn't necessarily know, as an outsider, even as a business person, kind of looking into it. But one of the things that I took away was there was a lot more cooperation going on behind the scenes with the elected folks who you don't regularly hear their name. But the people that you hear their name, they're the advocates for this. We can't compromise. We can't move in one direction or another. And I believe that if we could get rid of some of these folks that have made it a career, that there would be a lot more cooperation. Now, here's the wild card. On the progressive side, this new drive, because they were so weak with coming up with young, strong candidates, you end up with this socialist movement. You just end up with these folks that went after young people effectively, who were ill-informed, who were just thinking about, how do I get mine? How do I get government to just take care of it? Because I've watched my parents and they didn't get theirs, so I want to get mine. And I think that on a near-term basis, maybe that's a benefit, but on a long-term basis, we all know that's going to die on the vine, and it's not going to work either. So I would just make this observation. There's a lot of different things going on. One of them is you're dealing with a business guy that's coming in and saying, we're not going to do it the way we used to. And by the way, I don't really care if you make fun of me or if you call me names or if you do the typical political things. And by the way, if you think you can blackmail me behind the scenes, I don't care.
Yeah.
Just have at it.
Yeah.
Just know this, if you choose to go that way, you're going to get the bad side of me. Now, I have an opinion on Trump that some of what he is doing is because he has no other choice, and he's a New Yorker that's going to fight the street fight. And if you come after him, I'm sorry, he's going to come right back at you. But I do think there's some part of it that is the media magnet. It's the brand guy.
Yeah.
It's it's the guy that is building something long term. Let me give you something to just think about. So, because I give him credit and his family credit for being smart. So they built a nice business, but I wouldn't call the Trump brand one of the great brands of the world.
Sure.
I mean, they're not Coca-Cola or McDonald's or Apple or, they're just not. Well, let's just pretend for a minute he makes it 8 years. When he walks out the door at the end of 8 years, do you understand? They can put their family name on anything. Today, they can only put their family name on golf courses and hotels.
Yes.
When he leaves the presidency, he has built this army of middle-class people that will buy anything that has his name on it.
That's a great point.
This is an investment
That's a great
in creating
point.
a multi-billion-dollar company down the road.
That is such a great point. I had not thought of it that way, but you're right, because he has this rabid group of believers, of followers, of fans. He has created these true fans.
I'm not a prophet, but write this in your little book, Kent. When it's over, within the first 12 months, they will be in at least a half a dozen different businesses than they were in before.
Jot that down, Andrew. We're going to follow up on that. First 12 months.
Already there.
I wouldn't be shocked. I wouldn't be shocked at all. One of the things that I appreciate about Trump is that he doesn't have time for lobbyists. And what's interesting about let me just touch a little bit more on that. So, so Biden's raising this money, and Trump mentioned, I think it was in one of the debates, he could raise this money too if he'd be willing to do what they told him to do, which is what happens. With Biden.
It's true, but America doesn't understand that.
Well, that's a very big point but to really dumb it down, you have big corporations and people with a high vested interest in the decisions you're going to make as a politician. They pay you a whole bunch of money to do what they want to do. I mean, that's lobbying. It's really dumbed down form. Trump says no because that comes along with part of his drain the swamp. You're not going to get to tell me what to do. Kind of MO, which I appreciate. What's interesting, though, is then you have all these lobbyists, they have no access to Trump, and then they're trying to pay the people around Trump. So it's like all the people around Trump now they're trying to become lobbyists because they're trying to get an ear with Trump, and they have no other way because he won't sit with these lobbyists. So I do appreciate that about him, which is sort of this no-nonsense way of doing things, and you're not going to be able to buy me off, which I think is very good. I also think you have a very good point on the fact that he's a New Yorker, so he's not a career politician. And he's the only president that looks the same age or maybe even a little bit younger after a 4-year term than he did going in. And the point on that is that
spray on tan works.
Yeah, but it's not just a spray on tan. I mean, he doesn't look like he's aged a week, and I don't know that you can say that.
He certainly doesn't seem tired.
He doesn't, but here's why I think why. Because he made it in New York. And if you make it in New York, you can make it in D.C. I mean, if you make it in New York, that's a big, that's a dog-eat-dog world. That's high intensity, always on. I mean, you have to watch your back at all times. I mean, that's a whole world of its own. And when you can make it in New York, D.C. is not so bad.
Would you agree that, I would add to that and make this point and see if you agree with me. He's also the kind of guy that likes when he gets patted on the back. There's an ego there that just loves it. I mean, they talk about how can he go do 4 of, these rallies in the same day? And that's a good question because it could tire you out. But watch him. It's kind of like, he's this car with a lithium battery. And when he gets to the rally, he plugs himself into the people and it's recharging his battery.
Yeah, while he's there.
Yeah.
You're right. That's I totally agree with that. That's a very good observation. I mean, I don't know how he's getting it all done, honestly, but there seems to be an energy source there where he kind of thrives on it. And I think to be honest, I think he loves attention. I think he loves to have his back patted. I think he loves to be in the spotlight. But this is not new. We knew this a long time ago. I mean, he was in the TV world, right? I mean, you don't do that. Yeah. It's his whole gig. Yeah. But all right, here's what I think is a somewhat of an unfortunate maybe observation or it's unfortunate that we say it's not good to have career politicians because that's the only category that we say that in. We don't say it's unfortunate when people are in business for a long time. That's a very good thing. You gain experience and you get knowledge and you have all these different circumstances and that helps you grow. So it's very good when you hire someone, the more experience, the better, for the most part. We don't say that about a pastor. Like it's not good if a pastor's a pastor too long. It's usually great if they've been a pastor for 30 years. And that,
in the same church.
In the same church even.
Yeah, sure.
And that usually has an advantage over a guy who's just a pastor for 3 years. But what is it about when it comes to politics that when you're in it too long, it can corrupt you? So is there a way to change the laws around whatever it is that we're allowing the laws to be structured in a certain way that if you stay in politics too long, you tend to become corrupted? Because I don't disagree with that. I think that's actually true. But can't there be a way that we structure it where you can be in politics a long time and that now becomes an asset and not a liability?
I don't know if I'm smart enough to answer that question. Human nature always chooses self. And my experience in politics from a business point of view, there is so many opportunities for your self-interest to overcome your character. And I think by that I mean every day, every hour, people are telling you how wonderful you are. Every day, every hour, people are coming to you asking you for a favor to help them in return for them doing a favor for you. There's a portion of your day that is focused on what I'm going to call the business of politics. But I think that there is just a design element there that is almost impossible to prevent.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think it's a unique aspect. You were mentioning the business community. I would make this observation. Yeah, it's good. But the reality in the business community is people move from company to company to move their career along. They take an experience from one place and they apply it in a new place and they move on. In a church setting, what we're talking about is the senior pastor or the teaching pastor or the founding pastor. And yet in churches, there's other staff members and they move. Maybe they become, a teaching pastor in another church. And those are good things too. So I do think movement isn't as static as maybe we're talking about it. There might be some more there. You hear folks talk about term limits. I mean, it's for that to happen, you've got to first resolve the vitriol and the divide between Democrats and Republicans, because it's going to take a supermajority and then a constitutional convention to do that.
Yeah.
Now, could that have an impact? I think it could. I think it would do two things. You'd have to reform campaign finance then, because you're gonna no longer be getting guys that can just get all of this money from donors when the donors know that, let's say it's a senator and in 6 or 8 years you're out.
Yes, that's a big point.
So the whole campaign finance thing would have to get reformed at the same time that you would be reforming term limits. So it's a pretty complicated thing to change. Do I think it could be a benefit if it was done well? I do. I would spend more time trying to think about that than putting more justices on the Supreme Court. But I just don't see that happening in the current environment we're in.
I agree with that. And your thought along with campaign finance and donations, I think kind of touches on where I see issue too with corrupting politicians it comes back to this lobbying thing. I mean, the idea that if you have a bunch of money in this country, you can go spend it and get your way, that seems a little off.
Well, here's the bad side of it, of politics. And I'll just use the most current simple example for me. Because of my McDonald's career, I lived in Chicago for 25 years. President Obama was basically a neighborhood activist. Smart guy, he's law degree and taught a little bit in school, but he was a neighborhood activist, in the Chicago city, the city limits. I would imagine that his income was under $100,000 a year. Now, his wife was a partner in a law firm, so between the two of them, they did okay. Where else can you go in America and go from making $100,000 a year, right? In his case, he ran for the Senate, so that's 4 years, never took office because then he went right into running for president, right? So let's say that the presidential campaign was 2 years long, so now we're at year 6. He was president for 8 years and left. Either of you know what his net worth is today?
I have no idea.
It's well over $250 million. That's politics. Now, I'm not picking on him. He did great. I mean, the deals that he's landed since he left, but Clinton did the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, these guys that are smart are leveraging that experience to create huge wealth. Well, politics is the only place you can do that.
Yeah.
In the business world, you got to create a product,
Yep.
that everybody wants.
Yep.
You got to come up with an idea. You got to invent something that has a patent associated with it.
Yep.
And it takes time and money and sweat and tears, and you fail a half a dozen times. Politics is the only place where you can walk in the door and walk out and know you're okay.
What's interesting about that is you have Obama making, say, call it $100 or $2,000 a year, gets into the presidency, is now worth $250 million. And somehow lots of people would look at that and just think like that's just like a success story. That's very good.
Well, it is.
And it is.
It is.
I agree with that. But my point is that they liked the fact that he wasn't a very wealthy man and had a lot of success in business coming in. Because when you compare that to like W. Bush, and, with him being in the oil business and having some means, I mean, I guess his dad was more wealthy than I guess he would have been at the time. But don't you think like there's a perception where if you come up through the activist route, that's somehow perceived or received better now in this country than if you come up through the businessman route? And if you come up
on
through
on the progressive side,
I
don't think so.
Sure.
I don't think so on the conservative side. I think the conservative side
agree with that.
Values experience and work.
I do agree with that. But what's interesting about you making that statement, I totally agree. But I'm sort of equating now the progressive side with American sentiment because I feel like that's what we hear the most about. That's what's coming. That's what comes through.
That's the noise.
News.
That's the noise of the media.
It is. Yeah,
it's
it
not
really
America.
Is.
It's the noise of the media.
Yeah, which I think that is a key. That's a key distinction. So even though what you're saying about Trump is accurate, and I'm not a rabid Trump fan, but I think it would be better for this country to have him for the next 4 years. I can see the argument where he might be better suited to run the country the next 4 years than Biden.
I'm just looking at policy.
Yeah, I agree.
All.
I agree with that. How
personality-wise with the guy? I mean, you and I are pretty conservative guys.
Yeah.
I mean, he gives me pause.
Sure, I totally agree. Now, I do agree with that. I also think that I'll say this a couple of times where I've heard that he said something ridiculous or whatever, and you go to the video and actually watch it.
It's not as ridiculous.
It's not as ridiculous.
Yeah,
what is it? This was supposed to be way worse.
That's what you guys do. It's that thing called editing.
Exactly. This is like disappointing because right now he seems relatively sane, and I thought I was going to see an insane comment. You know what I mean? I think his Twitter gets a little crazy. So anyhow, this is where I was going with that. There is a fair bit, I think, of conservative, though evangelical, conservative folks that do think it would not be that think Trump needs to go.
Well, that's the Never Trumper
that.
Group and the Lincoln Project, and that's a really small minority.
So okay, so you think it is a small minority?
I do. I do. Yeah, I was going to make this comment earlier, and we got off on something else. I want to talk for a minute about Mike Pence. Now, it's not like he's a friend of mine or I'm close to him, but his character is indisputable. Mike's a solid believer. He and his wife, it's obvious that their faith is what drives who they are. And I would make this observation. He is the perfect partner with Trump. Because what Trump doesn't have, he has.
Mm-hmm.
And imagine for a minute, all this grief that Trump's getting about the response to the coronavirus. When's the last time you heard of the biggest crisis the country is going through and the president handing it to the vice president to run? That's pretty interesting to me. And I watched intently the conversation between Mike Pence and Kamala Harris in that last debate. What Trump lacks in the details, Pence has 100-fold over.
Yeah.
I mean, he knows the details.
Mm-hmm.
And you are not going to twist the details on him because nobody in the room is going to know the details better than him.
Mm-hmm.
And when I take a look at this administration, and I know that Pence wasn't Trump's first pick, but so many people came to him and said, this is what you got to do. And Trump's a good decision maker, right? I would imagine if you had him sitting in here in this room and you said, what's one of the best decisions you've made relative to your administration? He'd look you square in the eyes and he'd go, Mike Pence. So I do think that what happens here in America is he allows Pence to be visible. He gives him things that makes him visible. And that takes a little bit of the heat off of him
Yes.
when he's being Donald Trump, the New Yorker.
Yes, that's an interesting thought. I had not thought. So I was not thinking that Trump was giving Pence like extra airtime or whatever. I think Trump is the perfect candidate for Pence is the perfect candidate for Trump.
But you made this point earlier. Pence has a lot of authority and is given a lot of stuff. But the media won't report it. They just want to talk about Trump.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. I really enjoyed the vice presidential debate, honestly.
I thought it was well done.
I thought it was very well done. I thought Kamala Harris communicated her points pretty well. I thought Pence communicated his points very well. The whole thing, it was well structured. It's impressive to me for the way that they can communicate a viewpoint on an issue that apparently they don't really know what's going to be talked about ahead of time. They're going to have some ideas. They're going to be prepped a lot, of course. But they don't have the questions ahead of time. They don't even have the topics ahead of time. Is that accurate?
That's accurate.
And to be asked a question,
they have the topics. They know what the topics are.
Yep. So to be asked,
but not the questions.
Sure. So to be asked a question on the spot and to be able to communicate succinctly and clearly and effectively to the American people for 2 minutes and not ramble and jumble, that's an impressive ability. Impressive.
Yeah, my mind immediately goes to Amy Coney Barrett sitting there with no notes. I mean, that lady is stinking brilliant.
Yes, she is. She is. You see the moment where she held up the notebook.
Yeah.
And she was asked about everything
awesome.
That was so great. She's being asked about all the questions that she's answering and the notebooks on her table and the guy asked her, what's on the notebook? And she holds it up, and it's just blank. It was like a hotel notebook or whatever.
It says the U.S. Senate on the top.
Oh, is that what it was?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just picturing
Senate.
like this hotel notebook. Yeah, U.S. Senate at the top, and that's it. Amy Coney Barrett got in relatively easy. Like, that didn't turn out to be a dramatic fight like
the others.
That I thought they were going to do, but apparently there was just no other way. There was no way for them to stop it, right? And so that's why it was relatively smooth.
Oh, they did focus groups. They had internal strategy sessions, and they concluded that, one, you couldn't really go after her qualifications, and she had references from both sides of the aisle, and that she was a woman, and she was a mother.
Yep.
I mean, you look at all the bells that they would normally try to ring. I mean, they had to conclude that all that was going to do was lose votes for them if they went that route in the middle of this presidential election.
Well, there was one of the reporters, I think this was on ABC, before the vice presidential debate, I think, unless it was one of the presidential debates. It was when, Amy Coney Barrett was being talked about. She hadn't been confirmed yet and all of this. And the reporter, I kid you not, this was on ABC, the reporter called Pence it was someone they brought in. They called Pence what's the B word for like someone's like belligerent? It's not belligerent, but not a bully, but like they called him like it's right on the tip of my tongue, where someone like basically would like look down on other people because of their skin color or something. Not a racist, but they called him a very bad word, and they tried to position Amy Coney Barrett in terms of like being a fanatic. That was the term for Amy Coney Barrett, was a fanatic, a religious fanatic. That's where I thought this whole thing was going to go, and then it just sort of fizzled out. Because it seemed early on like the biggest problem that the left was going to have with Amy Coney Barrett was the fact that she was a Catholic. So let's all sit around and
well, what are you going to do with that?
And observe what we're hearing now.
Biden claims he's a Catholic, so
yeah, that's true. It didn't go anywhere.
It doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah, you're right. So where do you fall then on masks? You mentioned that earlier. Do you never wear a mask? Do you wear a mask if you have to? What's your kind of personal philosophy on that? Is mask wearing in America, is that the communists taking over? Is this like a signal operation?
I don't think so. I think that the difficulty with mask is what's the science. So let me answer your question, and I'll just give you my 2 cents on the science. Every retailer in America has a right to mitigate liabilities for themselves. So if a retailer is requiring that people have a mask on, you should have a mask on. I mean, it's their business. You're coming in their four walls. You need to abide by, their rules. From a government point of view, if there's a legal mandate that's within the boundaries of mandates, we need to honor government. We need to, do what is expected. That's different than what I think.
Right.
All right. So, I'm going to go along with that. Now, I will tell you, in the environment of our church, that Michael and I, started, we've been meeting as a church since May, and we don't require that folks wear masks.
Mm-hmm.
So
some do, some don't.
Most don't.
Okay. Yep.
There's a couple that do that, docs maybe that
Sure.
want to be careful, or, if there is someone that comes that's older that wants to protect themselves. We live stream, so we encourage folks that, if they've got special issues, to just stay home.
Mm-hmm.
And naturally, if you've got any kind of symptoms, we're asking you not to come. So that's my answer to your question. Now, as it relates to masks, here's the difficulty I have as a quantitative guy and being in the food industry. So I know that unless it is a 3-part filter with certain dimensions in it and certain materials, it doesn't eliminate what they're calling that sputum coming from your mouth, out into the air. I know that. I also know that if the mask doesn't have a good seal at the bridge of your nose, around the side of your cheeks, and across the bottom of your chin, that those same particles are going to come out from all of those areas. So it's the material and it's the fit. Then I know that if you don't wear it properly, right? If it's down below your nose, if it's off and on all the time, you're minimizing whatever effect it's going to have. So let's just take those 3 things, stop for a second, step back and look at the community we live. I mean, I'm going to pick a number and say 60 to 70% of the people that I run into just in our community have a cloth mask on that has no filtering capabilities at all.
Okay.
At all. None. All right?
But doesn't it still
But
stop
we're wearing masks, baby. And I would imagine some big subset of those people are maskites. They're I'm going to stare you down if you don't have a mask on.
For sure.
And I'm going to look at you as a guy in the food space that knows a little bit about this and go, that mask you have on doesn't do anything.
So, but doesn't it stop spit though? Doesn't it still help? Doesn't it?
Blowing your nose in a handkerchief does too. Holding your arm up, sneezing into your arm does too. Mm-hmm. The only point that I'm making is, from an efficacy point of view, there are variables that have a huge impact on the benefit. And we have no mechanism, method, practice in society to fix that.
Yeah.
That's all. That's the only comment I will make about masks. Now, I've already told you, I'm going to wear it where it's required. I'm going to wear it if someone is uncomfortable that I don't have one on.
Sure.
Just out of respect.
Yep.
But if you're asking me, does this make sense? This is another one of the dings I'm giving the medical field.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you one other, and I'll keep it anonymous. There's a number of physicians I know, and I was having a conversation with, I've had several of these conversations. I'll just use one as an example. And after, I heard them eloquently describe all the things with masks and social distancing, and pick it. I said, hey, that's really helpful. Could I ask you a question? And if their answer is, of course. I said, so let's pretend for a minute that it's a year from now. And we've got killer vaccines out there, and everybody's gotten vaccinated. As a medical professional, will people still contract the COVID-19 virus? Whenever I ask that question, there's usually this period of dead silence that feels like it's 5 minutes and it's probably only 15 or 20 seconds. Some, I take their breath away with the question. And if I do, I say, well, listen, I was talking to another physician, and his answer to me was, yes, people would contract the virus. So I'm going to assume you would agree with me. If that's true, here's the thing I would suggest to you folks in the medical field. We are conditioning Americans to believe that they're not going to get the virus. We need to start educating them that this is going to be around forever. And with it being around forever, you know, like I know, that the best vaccines are 70% effective and 30% not. Do you get the influenza vaccine?
No.
Yeah, I don't either. But I got it one time, and that year I got the flu. So it was,
of course, because they guess on that.
It was like zero. Well, there's different strains.
The strains always change,
yes.
And they guess ahead of time before the strain comes out what strain's going to come. No one knows, so they guess and create the vaccine.
So here's what I say to the physician. Here's the greatest benefit you can be to America as medical professionals. You can start toning down the rhetoric on social distancing and face masks, because that's not going to fix it. And you need to start building up information and communication around the fact that we're going to be okay. And this is going to be another virus a year from now or 18 months from now, like influenza is, and there will be a vaccine. And we're not going to prevent everybody from dying. There is no talking points around that right now. And if you're involved at all in the communications world, it takes anywhere from 9 to 12 months to change behavior. You know, they pull this 30 days, no way. It's multiple messages delivered in different ways over a longer period of times if you're talking about really affecting change in behavior.
Nationally, certainly. Yeah.
And we haven't even started talking about that. All we're talking about is go get your masks. If you're near somebody, be afraid of them and go hide in your house.
Yeah.
And then, hey, I'm not even talking about California, where you got the governor of California telling people how many people can be in their house for Thanksgiving dinner, and that you have to be outside to have the dinner, and that it can't be buffet style.
No.
I mean, oh, yes.
You're kidding me.
Oh, yes. This is the level of detail that they're in California right now. So
that's communicated exceptionally well. I'm going to steal that.
And it is the New England Journal of Medicine. It finally came back
there
to
you
me.
go.
So it was the American Medical Association and the New England Journal of Medicine.
Okay, interesting. That idea that, do you think, even with the best vaccine, a year from now, there will be people that will sometimes still get COVID-19 is such an interesting question.
Well, the answer is yes.
Of course it's yes. Of course it's yes. And so then the question is, then what do we believe to be different or true about next year that's different or not true about right now? And lots of people would say vaccine.
Well, here's what I'm going to tell you. The America that I know, if a year from now we're still saying the only way you can live is with a mask, it's over.
Yeah.
Because you're going to have a rebellion.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, particularly if there's not real robust scientific evidence to back up the fact that the masks really do help. And by the way, so when I need to wear a mask, we flew last weekend, I had it under my nose as much as possible. And technically, now you're starting to see the signs like make sure you're covering your nose and so forth. Does it spread quicker out of your mouth, or does it spread just as quick out of your nose?
Doesn't matter.
Okay. So if you're contagious with COVID, it's not like if you cover your mouth, you're all of a sudden good. It's going to come out of your nose, and you're going to infect people anyway.
Well, but let me give you the greatest science experiment that I don't hear anybody talking about either. Let's go to Orlando and go to Disney World. Now, Disney World requires that everybody wears a face mask. And they have social distancing in their lines to get on rides. And they've minimized the number of people that can be there. But it's still Disney World. I mean, there's still a lot of people inside those parks. Now lay against it what I've just said about all the criteria of the right mask and wearing it the right way and all that kind of stuff. How is it that Disney World hasn't had a major outbreak?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I mean, we should have about 1,000 people down there, like measuring and checking and understanding and trying to, draw the conclusion. Why is that?
Yes.
This is why I'm saying the medical field is failing us.
Mm-hmm.
They're so busy at just the focus of how do I take care of someone when they get it? They're not focused on what do we need to do now that we know we got it?
Yeah, that's right. Yep. Well, this is the age-old problem in America. It's the focus on a quick fix and medications and things like that, and the focus is not about drinking water and going on a walk and getting some sunshine and having a good diet and exercising properly and those types of things. The focus is not there, I guess, because you can't patent those things and make money off of those things.
That's part of it.
That's just information. But I did hear Bill Gates say, I think this was in the last couple of days, he verbatim said the FDA is the gold standard of regulators. Now, when he says that about a vaccine, which in this video, I don't know who was interviewing him. I wish I knew. Can you pull it up, Andrew? Joe Rogan shared it on his Instagram. So if you go to his Instagram and pull that up, she looked familiar, but I can't remember her name. Bill, I don't know much about this, but I believe he's funding some vaccines or has a vested interest in bringing the vaccine to bear here.
He has an entire nonprofit that does nothing but that. Now, he's focused on the African continent, primarily, but it's a big deal.
Yes. So he says that, first of all, the way he was talking, it was very surprising for someone at that level of success. It looked like this was one of his first interviews, and he was drinking a cup of coffee while he was talking, and every third word was and it was very shifty. It was like, if this is your doctor talking to you like this, I'm not going to trust that whatsoever. It just was not trustworthy to me. However, so the gold standard is the FDA is the gold standard of regulators. Oh, okay. So that's the same FDA that cleared OxyContin and said, no, OxyContin is not addictive. You know, they said that? They said OxyContin is not addictive. And so we brought OxyContin to market, thanks to our gold standard regulators at the FDA, and it's devastating. So do we have a little bit of a level of maybe it's even distrust or at least concern when they want to spoon feed us some of this information? I think it's good to be a little apprehensive out of the gate. Yeah, play that, Andrew, if you can. I don't know if people can hear that very good. Bill Gates on vaccine trials. No, not playing.
He's just got to turn the mic
on. Oh, volume has to be on. By the way, I think 70 people. Yeah.
3 million views.
Concerning. We looked. After the second dose, at
Can you turn it up?
80% of participants experienced a systemic side effect, ranging from severe chills to fevers. So, are these vaccines safe?
Well, the FDA, not being pressured, will look hard at that. The FDA is the gold standard of regulators, and their current guidance on this, if they stick with that, is very, very appropriate. And the side effects were not super severe. That is, it didn't cause permanent health problems for the things there. Moderna did have to go with a fairly high dose, and so to get the antibodies. Some of the other vaccines are able to go with lower doses to get responses that are pretty high, including the J&J and the Pfizer. And so there's a lot of characteristics of these vaccines It's great that we have multiple of them that are
No,
going out
everybody-
there. And yes, I
That's good, Andrew. We can pause that. I mean, when I see that, I'm just like, man, I don't trust what he's saying.
That's his style. He's that way.
Is that just how he talks?
Yeah, he's a tech guy.
Okay.
That's the deal. He and his wife are very active in this space. I'm skeptical. There's so much money involved in it, and he has so much influence because of the money that you got to be careful just listening to him. His comment about the FDA being the gold standard, setting aside your Oxycontin issue, I would agree with him. As a guy that's traveled all around the world, from a science-based process perspective, the FDA is more buttoned up than anybody. And most Western European countries come to the FDA for advice. So maybe they could be better.
Sure.
And they should have caught.
What you compare
and
it
they
to,
should have caught that.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like the United States is the best country in the world too. And look at all the shots we're throwing at it today.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
I mean, I wouldn't want to live anywhere else.
I agree. Yeah. I like it here.
Yeah.
I think that the country had some very good founding principles. And I'll also say this. Our geography in this country is amazing.
The diversity of it.
The diversity of our geography it's really, really beautiful here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are parts you can go to. We were in Phoenix, and there you have the desert. Then you go to California, and you have. I mean, it's almost like you can go to different parts in this country, and it feels like you're in a different country entirely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's great, yeah.
And it's
a great place to
it's
be.
a safe place.
Mm-hmm.
Rabbit trail. Patty, my wife, and I were talking about every couple of years trying to get everybody together. We have 11 grandkids, so try to get my 3 sons and their wives and the 11 grandkids together to go somewhere. And she had these big ideas and buying airline tickets and going here and there. And it was out in the Pacific or down in the Caribbean. I looked at her and I went, because she wants to do it next spring. And I said, I appreciate that. I love you to death. And yet, the only place where there is sun that we can be sure will be open and safe is Florida.
Florida's not a place I find myself wanting to go to that often, to be honest.
But you understand what I'm saying? I mean, DeSantis isn't going to close it down.
Yeah, yeah. That's true. Have you heard, back to Trump and when it comes to the left, are you versed at all with some of the theories around like QAnon and some of those thoughts where there's this sort of, really bad things going on under the kind of the left Democratic Party, and Trump's sort of like ratting him out? I don't know if you know much about it, but
I don't.
Okay.
Here's what I do know. When you take a look at the caliber of people that he has brought into the administration to run these departments, areas of the bureaucracy, it is reasonable to believe that they are turning over rocks and finding stuff they didn't expect to find.
Mm-hmm.
That's my guess.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. Let's talk about the business environment. I'm kind of curious where you're seeing opportunities now. Actually, before we get into that, I'd love to hear how Old Hickory Smokehouse did this year with the COVID. And you said in one day you lost 50% of your business, which is, to put a business plan together that has a contingency for your revenue dropping 50% in one day, it seems impossible. So, but you must have made it through. How did you get through this summer with your business?
There's a couple of things that happened. One, we refocused, put a lot of emphasis on grocery and club stores to go after that business.
Because I don't know, what's a club store?
Costco.
Oh, okay, got it.
Sam's Club.
Okay,
Yeah. So that's we've that worked well for us. That helped. And then I think probably the second thing is we had 2 customers that in the what I'm going to call the national chain restaurant business that just did a really good job of figuring it out faster than other people. Did a great job building out their to-go business. Decided to include one of our products in it. So although the business went to 0 and then it was 50% and then it was 75% with those guys, we're back up to normal, maybe even a little bit more because of the work that they've done. And then in the club store business, I can't talk about it, but we're about to start a really big project for one of the guys in that space that will probably make next year the biggest year we've ever had.
Wonderful.
So we went from, a place where you thought one of the possibilities was turning the lights out to recovering from that. And we just have some great people that did some great work, but we have a great product that's unique. And our methodologies are unique. And, the good news is we've been in the market now for about 4 years, going on 5. And our reputation was reaching that tipping point where folks knew. And that helped a lot when we tried to pivot in the direction of grocery because, folks kind of knew who we were. So it's a rough year, but I think we're going to end the year okay.
I'm glad to hear that. Did you mention a health company as well that you've started?
I'm working on a venture right now in the healthcare space. The simplest description might be physical therapy space.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
And has it started or you're structuring it now?
We're in the phase of funding it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, very cool. And you have 3 boys, is that right?
I do.
Okay. And they're all involved with Old Hickory Smokehouse?
They are. My oldest runs our plant operations. My middle son is responsible for all of our sales and marketing, and then my youngest handles finance and administration.
Yeah, wonderful. Where are you seeing any opportunities out there? Not that you're going to jump on it yourself, but things have shaken up a lot. People are moving around. I mean, it's even shaking people up geographically. I mean, people are moving out of some states and into others, and you have restaurants that are. I mean, it's during times like this. There's always opportunities that pop up. Are you seeing any opportunities out there that you don't necessarily intend to act on, but that have become noticeable to you through all of this?
Well, there's the most obvious one for us, because we're in the manufacturing or the processing space, is there are companies that perhaps didn't have the capital but had a decent product, and they fell on some bad times. There's some acquisition stuff out there that might be interesting to look at. I think from a perspective of just the food channel itself, they're more interested in higher levels of quality, more of a focus on differentiating themselves, a lot of emphasis on the all natural and the gourmet kind of thing, which plays into what we're doing. So we're seeing, we're taking meetings and receiving phone calls from folks that we didn't anticipate as a result of that. So I think there's been some unsettling. If you take a look at the grocery channel as a whole, I mean, they're the big winner in this. Because when you shut down the restaurants, people still ate the same amount of food. They just had to go buy it at a grocery store. Mm-hmm. So, whether you're a Walmart or Kroger or any of the other big grocers, your business, this is going to be this would be, I think, for all of them, the best year they've ever had. And that's a combination of just general in-store sales going up and their online businesses exploding. Mm-hmm. And this movement for, in the grocery space for home delivery or pick up at the door where you don't have to go in and do the shopping yourself is, played right into the idea of folks, cocooning in their homes.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with one of the original founders of Uber, Travis Kalanick? I think, is that right, Andrew? Kalanick. Has now started Cloud Kitchen, a food delivery service. Are you familiar at all with that?
I know what it is.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
So apparently, Travis Kalanick, he has spent $130 million now in ghost kitchen startups, and he has the business model basically is they have the tech and they own the real estate, and they set up the kitchen and then they lease it to the restaurateur, and they have their brand and make their food in there, and then they handle the delivery folks that come in. And he's being very secretive about where he's buying properties, and he's making sure that the brokers that are buying his properties are keeping hush-hush. His employees are not allowed to have the fact that they work at Cloud Kitchen on their LinkedIn pages. Like, he's really flying under the radar with this thing. But I think it's a fascinating business model. I actually really like it because food delivery service is it's up right now.
Yeah, there's another firm that's a little further along than he is that's got, I want to say 12 or 15 locations already up and running. And I'm only aware of this because a buddy of mine in the financial markets area hooked me up with the founder so that I could give him some advice and we could kind of talk about things. They have big dreams of blowing that thing out.
Yeah.
And they've got in their early locations, they've done really well. I probably shouldn't talk about numbers and such, but they've done really well.
Yeah. Are they in various markets or one market? Various markets.
But they might only have one location right now.
Sure.
It's like a test location in a big metropolitan area. Yeah.
Is it the business model where they own the building? Because what Travis's business model, of course, where any of these food delivery services model, it now allows you to go rent space or own space in an industrial park. You don't need you don't have a retail location at all. So your real estate costs go down.
They effectively build out a kitchen.
Okay.
Create menus. Now, I don't know what Travis's strategy is, but these folks are actually building what I would call branded menu offerings as if that kitchen was producing for multiple restaurants.
That's right. That's exactly what Travis's model is too.
Yeah. So it's an interesting idea.
Yep.
Now, it's going to bypass the regular restaurant space then.
Yes.
And it's interesting. I don't know how well it'll do or not. I think it'll do. I'm struggling for the right words here. It reminds me of the .com boom and bust. All the brick and mortar stores were going to go away because everything was going to be done online. And what it ended up being was that the brick and mortar guys became the infrastructure for the .com piece.
That's
and
right.
It kind of merged together. I wonder if this isn't going to have a similar kind of an outcome where you can't take away. Take some example. Take like your favorite fast casual or casual dining restaurant. You're still going to want to buy food from that place just because Travis opens one and yours is called Big Joe's and he calls his Big Mama's. You still have an affinity to this brand over here called Big Joe's because you've got an experience there. And it takes time to build that experience. So it seems to me, if you're talking about a growth strategy that's national in a bunch of places, I would not be surprised if it doesn't. What happens is in these kitchens, they get certified to make menu items from some of these well-known brands, and there's some kind of a deal put together.
That's interesting,
to handle
white labeling
the takeout.
Yep.
Now, there's difficulties with that because now you're taking same-store sales from an infrastructure location and putting it in these ghost kitchens, but there's something going to happen there.
Yeah.
And that's all of these new ideas like that. There's some merging of existing infrastructure in them at some point.
Yes. What I like about his business model is he owns the tech and he owns the real estate.
The tech is the driver. Without the tech, you can't do it.
Yeah. And then the restaurateur is the one that's taking, I mean, they have all the risk and they're putting in all of the sweat and like putting in all of the work, and you have your tech already and you own the real estate. And I mean, restaurants come and go.
The guy I spoke with, they're operating it all themselves. So they're operating. They're operating the restaurants.
Yeah,
too.
That's a little.
They were
more
concerned
intense.
about quality control.
Wow.
And consistency, because they're trying to build brands
Sure,
that
I
cross
see.
cities. So
Okay.
now whether they'll, whether they would get into franchising or
Yeah.
contract employees, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's come back to just some of the trends we're seeing kind of in America now. Sometimes it seems like there's a segment of the population, large segment of the population now, that is forgetting some of the values of capitalism. And it's leaning more towards socialism. Do you see, I mean, you're a business guy and capitalism has treated you well and there's clear benefits there. Do you feel like our capitalism in America is as it should be? Do you feel like there's some more refining to do? What are your thoughts on some of those trends now?
Yeah, my immediate answer is I don't know, because I don't have the data. My intuition is there's not as big a movement as the media would have you believe. When I look at just the geographics of America, and we'll go back to those same states, California, Illinois, New York, New Jersey, and if you want, we can toss, Washington in there. There's obviously an influencing factor in the population that leans to more progressive ideas like that. I would say California is different than New York. And I would say that Illinois doesn't know what it wants to be because it's such a disaster. California and New York still think that they're alive and they matter. They think they influence everything, in America. But if you take a look at, one of my intuition, what it's built on. So I look at just the migration of population. So in this last year, 4 million people have left California, Illinois, and New York. And they all have moved to Texas, Tennessee, and Florida. So there's a migration out of these cities. There's not a lot of good data on who are these people that are leaving. Are they progressive oriented and they just, are tired of whatever the circumstances are, but they want to bring their progressive ideas to where they're going? Are they reformed progressives? Been there, done that. Okay, now I'm going to, move more in the direction of conservatives. Or are they the conservative folks that are in these states that just know they have to get out? There really isn't any good data on that. Mm-hmm. So you got to stay at the macro level from my perspective and say, well, in the states in the U.S. where there is a heavy push for this progressive socialist kind of movement, there's a pretty big migration out of those states. Mm-hmm. That's what causes me to believe it's not as big a movement as the media might make us think it is. Mm-hmm. Now, I could be wrong, but people aren't bailing out of places that they're excited about.
Yeah, you're right about that. Now, why? Let me ask you this. Why would the media want to portray a more socialistic mentality in America? What's behind that? What's the motive? Why would they want to do that? Why would they want to push that agenda to begin with?
I'm going to give you the I don't know answer again. Here's my intuition. Let's take a segment and let's call it faith-based people. There are faith-based people that are progressive and there are faith-based people that are more conservative when it comes to what I call social issues. So there's a mindset on the progressive side that says we need to love people better. We need to do more things for people. Then on the conservative side of the faith-based movement, there is a view of we absolutely need to love people while we're holding them accountable and they're accepting responsibility for their own lives. That's pretty different kind of worldviews. So I think there are two worldviews in America. Now, if I go over here to this progressive worldview that says we need to do things, that's where you start drilling down into, okay, so how does that get done? From a government point of view, there's a mindset that, well, let's let government help figure that out. Let's funnel it through taxes into the government and allow them the opportunity to do that. So you hear all of these talking points about, well, if I'm a Democrat, healthcare matters and the Affordable Care Act is all that matters. Well, there's all kinds of issues, and it isn't about the Affordable Healthcare Act. It's about everybody should have health insurance. So I think you've got this divide that exists that isn't so much. I would contend that there's a whole populace that might fall into this, what you're calling socialist mindset, that don't even know what socialist is. What they know is, I got a big heartstring, and I'd like to help people that need help. And all these politicians are telling me we can do it. We have the capacity to do it. So I want to believe, that is going to happen. And over time, when those promises don't get fulfilled, things change. I mean, look at what Trump has pulled off, even with, the diverse communities today, whether it's, the African-American community, the Hispanic community. I mean, 8 years ago, who would have thunk that, a third of folks in those communities would vote Republican again? Mm-hmm. So I think we're at a place now where things just move faster. So this idea of socialism in the media has moved faster, but it'll have its sunset. Mm-hmm. And then the next thing, will surface. And that's where my intuition is. On the, if I put my fear factor up, the fear for me would be that from a government control point of view, that sector gets so much control of the government that they make changes that are fundamental in the government that we won't ever recover from. Mm-hmm. So I think I don't think it's about the number of people. I think it's about the influence and the ability for that small number of people to control things. And I think that's the worry that a lot of people have with the Democratic Party today. Even if you want to say Joe Biden's a nice guy, which I don't think. I think he's a corrupt politician, but there you go. I'm saying what I think again. But even if you want to say, he's a nice guy and he's the guy, he's your crazy uncle that you want to just hang out with and throw your arms around. The worry is, well, the people sitting in the wings that have his ear that are trying to influence it, they're still going to be around. And if he folds and implements some of those kinds of things, there may be no coming back. Mm. So I think it's more an issue of influence and power than it is size of that populace.
Yeah. Now, is there one of the great things about our government is that we have these checks and balances, but how have we gotten to the place now where the Democratic Party has the ability to take over or get enough of a control there that could damage some of those checks and balances permanently?
Well, here's the simple thing. It's in the election. And I would just ask you to remember, politicians lie. Sorry, they just do.
Yep.
Hillary Clinton ran as a centrist. She didn't run as a progressive socialist. Joe Biden is trying to run as a centrist. Mm. So what they do is, when it comes to the point of an election process, they try and present themselves as somebody closer to the middle. Mm-hmm. And they deny that they're moving in one direction or another. That's what worries me.
Yeah, that makes sense. But why? So our checks and balances have been so good for so many years. Why is it now at risk? That's kind of my question. Is it because we've had some kind of just drift over a long period of time, and now that drift is getting to a critical kind of tipping point?
Well, I don't know. I wouldn't say I'm an expert in any of this. I just would make an observation. Do not discount the impact that 8 years of Barack Obama had on this country. He came into office as an inspirational figure, almost bigger than life. And he won the hearts of the centrists in America, not just the Democrats, but some centrist Republicans and the young people. And that gave him a platform to make a lot of fundamental changes across a period of 8 years in government. So the starting point, when you think about it for Biden, if he were to win, isn't from zero. He's starting already from a strong place because these changes have been made. If you go before Barack Obama, so whether you're dealing with the Bushes or you go back to Clinton, Clinton was a centrist. Apart from dismantling, the national defense, I mean, he's the guy that took it, the army from 1 million people to 500,000 people to use the money, for something else. Apart from that, he was pretty much a capitalist. He was all about get the economy going. He did some tax cuts. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until Barack Obama became president that we had this socialist movement.
Yeah. And by the way, Clinton spent a whole lot more money on cops.
He did. Yeah.
So he was not this idea of like defunding or lowering funding for the police that was not what Clinton was about. He hired a whole bunch.
Yeah, and the only point I'm trying to make is this is something that started over 12 years ago now. Mm-hmm. Because Trump's been in for 4. He's been fighting it his whole 4 years.
Yeah.
It wasn't like this thing just surfaced. This is a result of 8 years of
that's
changes.
Interesting perspective. Yeah, that is interesting. Very interesting. Where do you? So you have sons that are my age, some older, I think, and you have 11 grandkids. What are your hopes, and then what are your concerns for your grandkids growing up in America?
Well, one of the things I'm really happy about, and it was one of the reasons of moving our business from Chicago to Tennessee, was getting my grandkids out of Illinois. And, we moved here in 2012. So, we've been here 8 years now. My oldest grandson was 9 or 10 when we moved here. He's graduating from high school this year. And then some have been born, since we moved here. We've got, 4-year-olds to 17-year-olds. So I'm really grateful that my kids get to grow up in Tennessee. My grandkids get to grow up in Tennessee. And I can see already the influence of a respectful culture. So that, I guess that's one of the things that I would say I feel good about their future.
Yep.
Because they're not in Illinois. The most important thing that matters to me is their faith. The world's going to fall apart. I mean, God's word tells us that He's going to end it at some point. So for us to think that we're not going to run into suffering and issues and trials, I'll be kind and call it naive. I'll be unbiblical and call it stupid. Mm-hmm. To think that. So I'm more interested in how do we develop young people that actually have a faith basis. Can't make them believe, but can we equip them that they understand the Word of God, that they see how the Word of God comes to life in their own life, and then pray that, in fact, they respond in faith. So, that's my biggest, of anything. I know that I can't change the environment they're going to be in. I can't, I'm not going to be here. But I sure can, help build that, framework for them. And we're actively involved with our families. That's the other good thing. Our family was spread out like most families. And now they're all here. And I think I might have mentioned this to you 2 years ago. I would have never expected to be in Tennessee, let alone all my family be here. So
Did the business kind of bring them back together?
it did.
Okay.
Yeah, it did. We had one of my sons was in California, one was in Illinois, one came down here earlier. When we got rid of our manufacturing business in Illinois, we consolidated and just had it down here. That brought two of them here. I had another business that was in the healthcare consulting space, and that son worked in that business, and it was based in Los Angeles. So we felt like this business here had some pretty big legs to it. So we pulled him out of that and, asked him to kind of lead the sales and marketing side for us. And shortly after that, as a family, they decided to move here.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That must be really great to have the kids here.
It's awesome.
I can believe that.
I go to football games on Friday night to watch.
Oh, yeah?
I have 3 grandsons that are playing 4 grandsons that are playing football.
That's very cool.
Yeah,
Very
if I just brag on one of them, my oldest grandson, Kyton, he goes to Grace Christian Academy, and he is a middle linebacker. And he is the number one guy in Tennessee for tackles, for creating fumbles and fumble recoveries.
Wow.
Yeah, so
good for him.
Yeah, it's fun watching Kyton
That's
play.
very cool. For context, isn't Taylor Lewan a middle linebacker?
O-lineman.
Oh, okay. I had that wrong. When you say being around respectful people, I forget exactly how you put it, but it sounded like you're saying the culture or the people maybe are a little, I guess, better or more respectful in Tennessee than Illinois. Is that accurate? Is that where you say they are in a respectful environment?
I mean, we could get into a deep conversation on that. I'd use these words as kind of like bellwethers. In Illinois, it's more transactional. In Tennessee, it's more relational.
I see. Yeah, just the culture of the state, the culture of the people here. That's interesting how there's differences like that. But
by the way, I think people in Tennessee are friendlier.
Yeah.
And they're polite.
Yeah. I agree. This became home for us very quickly in 2014 when we moved here. We really like it here, man. It's home for us. People are really nice. I like the weather here too. I mean, the winter could, there's a little plenty rain.
Yeah.
And it gets a little on the cool side, but it's not bad.
Every time I want to whine about the weather here in the winter, I just go up to Chicago and go, "Oh, that's why I moved."
Exactly. Yes. Well, anything else, Wayne, you wanted to get into?
No,
here?
man, you wore me out.
Yeah. You wore me out too a little bit. That doesn't happen very often. We really got into it there with the politics stuff. That was fun, though. Thank you. I enjoyed that.
Well, I'm
glad. Good thoughts. I appreciate. I liked your your data-driven mentality too. I always appreciate that. Like objective information as opposed to like what you think or feel. Like and we need more of that.
Well, I'll tell you one thing I say to the guys that I disciple from a faith-based point of view. My opinion doesn't matter. Everybody's got an opinion, and most often the opinion's uninformed. So it's better for me to be informed and just state, here's information, and then we could draw some conclusions from that. But waxing eloquently about my opinion, it makes me nervous. So
yeah, that's instructive. I appreciate that. Let's just close with that.
Okay.
Wayne Wolf, thank you for coming by.
All right, man. Thanks
Appreciate
for
it.
letting me hang with you.
Privilege.
It's good.
Very good.